Hey there everyone, it's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator, and today I'm going to talk to you about yet another book that has expanded my reading journey. The previous two I did Jekyll and Hyde, which led me into another type of writing from that time period, and Watchmen, which sort of opened the doorway, so to speak, on graphic novels. This one here is a little bit different. This one here is Australian fiction. Now, I'm from Western Australia, but my reading knowledge of Australian fiction is almost zero. I think I've read probably two books in my life that are of Australian works, and I think both of them were actually stuff that I read as part of the school curriculum. I think one of them was The Book Thief, which was a massive book when it came out, and I cannot remember what the other one was. It's just something I've never really gotten into. You've got all these authors from down here who are quite popular in different ways. You've got probably the literary type, which is Tim Winton, then you've got, I think, Matthew Riley, who's quite popular with the action crowd. He's sort of like the Jack Reacher of Australia in a way. But then I came across this movie a couple of years ago called The Dry with Eric Bana, which actually was quite a decent hit in Australia. And the plot intrigued me, so I figured, why not give this next book a try? This book being the second one in the trilogy by Jane Harper, who has sort of exploded in recent years. She's one of the most popular Australian authors out there right now, particularly for this trilogy, although I'm not sure if it's going to continue on from there. And this book is called Force of Nature, which is the second in the trilogy. And it involves federal agent Aaron Falk from Melbourne, who goes and investigates, basically, a mysterious disappearance in the Girlang mountain ranges north of Melbourne. And in the first one, The Dry, it sort of takes place in his hometown and very desolate, and there's a drought going on. And the second one here, which I believe takes place not long after those events there, much more different temperament and everything else in between. Instead of being drought and just everything's just on the verge of exploding into fire, this takes place in the forests, in the rainforests, in the beautiful mountain ranges and all that sort of thing that are in that part of Australia. And to be quite honest with you, this book took a bit of navigating for me to finally enjoy. I come from a generally literary background, so the type of books that I read, I tend to focus, the story for me is always the back of my mind. I approach books the same way I approach movies. In terms of movies, I view the cinematography first and the story sort of falls back. When it comes to books, I approach the structure of the writing first and see where that leads me before I even take notice of the story. This is a whole different beast. This is a book designed purely to enthrall you, to thrill you, to keep you guessing. It is a book that puts story first. It doesn't care so much about the way it's written. It cares more about providing you with a sense of entertainment and of genre thrills. The only other author I can think of that I read who writes this way is, in America, Dennis Lehane, of which I've only read two books by, The Drop and Shutter Island, both quite phenomenal pieces of works. Shutter Island, I think, is a much better book than The Drop, which was based on a short story called Animal Shelter, again adapted into a movie in 2014 with Tom Hardy. But Force of Nature is a really fascinating book because every time I was about to figure something out, or every time I was about to get pulled out of the story because I wasn't enjoying it, Jane Harper would just so happen in that moment sort of throw a sort of a spanner into the works and basically keep me engaged. And that's the greatest compliment I can give this book, is that it kept me engaged all the way through, even with my reservations about the thing. I sort of had to throw away all my preconceived notions about the way I approach books to the side there, and approach this from a purely different and new perspective on how to read this type of literary fiction or genre fiction, crime fiction, thriller fiction, mystery fiction, whatever you want to call it. And by pulling all those to the side and just focusing on it as purely as a piece of storytelling, Jane Harper is a very good storyteller. She's very good at what she does and is good at conducting and conceiving a way of being able to throw you off balance with the story and pull you in different directions, only to have the rug pulled from under you for something else as well. I noticed that when I watched the first movie. I haven't actually read the first book, but I watched the first movie, is that there's two sort of mysteries going on, and they're happening concurrently, but they're happening 20 years apart. Both involve the main character, Aaron Falk, in a personal way. Now, this book here, in which him and his partner Carmen go to the Giralang mountain ranges to find this missing woman. Basically, it's 5 women who go on a corporate retreat, work retreat, one of those sort of team building exercises in the mountain ranges, which, believe me, is probably one of the most horrific things I could ever get involved with. Is just, I could not imagine doing like a work retreat. That just sounds like the worst nightmare possible. And they're meant to be picked up a few days later. They arrive there late, and instead of 5 of them, there's only 4 of them, and they are completely just destroyed, mentally and physically. One of them is bitten by a snake. There's 4 of them instead of 5. There's a woman missing. Something happened to that woman in those few days that they spent out there. And the whole book is designed in such a way as to give you every chapter where it's told from Aaron Falk's point of view in the investigation. But at the end of every chapter, there's sort of like a third part of that chapter there, which tells you the backstory of what happened the week prior involving the 5 women on that retreat. And if I'm being perfectly honest with you, it got to a certain point about halfway through the book there where I kind of wanted all 5 of those women to just annihilate each other, because they were all annoying and they were all had some form of pure dislike about them. I didn't like any of the characters out of that group of 5 women there. And to be honest with you, I would have loved it if they all just annihilate each other, just kill each other. Obviously, it doesn't happen because at the start of the book, you see 4 of them return. But that's where the interesting thing comes into play. What you end up finding out through the course of this quite short read, but also very fast read, is that all these characters who were initially apparently chosen through reasons to be on this corporate retreat, because apparently a certain number of women from different departments get chosen, is that in one way or another, they are all connected in very weird and almost downright evil ways. They are all connected. Aaron Falk and his partner Cartman themselves are connected to the case, because the woman who disappeared, Alice, was working for them, trying to obtain all these documents so that they could bring this company down, bring this company to their knees, because apparently the owners of this company, one of whom is on this retreat, Jill Bailey, are pretty much doing bad things, illegal things. So they have a personal connection to this as well. But here's the problem I had, was that even though Aaron Falk has this connection through Alice's disappearance, he's not really personally connected himself with what happened in that backstory there, which means that for that every third part of the chapter involving what happened to them was probably the worst part of the book each time for me. I just wasn't interested in it, because I didn't like any of the characters in that corporate retreat. Not once, not any of them. All 5 of them are just pure annoyance and of disliking. But I don't know if that's by design or not. If it is by design, then obviously Jane Harper did the correct thing, and it really got to me because I just did not care for it. I think this book I'd liked a little bit less than seeing the first movie, purely because Aaron Falk was not personally involved in that part of the book. It's sort of like he is the main character of the book, but in a way he's pushed to the side just a little bit each time. So it didn't feel like he was the complete character the whole time, like he was in The Dry, the first one. But the descriptions themselves are, again, it's precise, it gets to the point, and it's not trying to be intelligent or anything like that. It's merely a story device to push the plot along, to get you interested and listen to it. I imagine this is one of those books that would sound amazing on an audiobook as a piece of storytelling. It hooks you. It doesn't need many words to describe what's going on, but it chooses the right ones to be able to get you into the plot. It chooses the right ones to describe things. It doesn't spend 2 pages describing the situation and then getting into it. It goes right into it, and I mean right into it. And I'm not used to that sort of thing. This is new territory for me. Just like the previous 2 books I've read, this is all new territory for me, and it's opening up different avenues. What else is interesting is that there's a third plot element in this book here, which takes place even further in the past, involving a serial killer called Martin Kovacs, who was involved in the Giralang Mountains where the girls are. And even that has a certain weaving way of getting into the story itself, and it sort of puts this element of tense and of thrills into the reader. It makes you sort of think, oh, what's going on here? What's going on here? Does he have family that is committing these serial killer acts after he died? Every time I kept thinking about Martin Kovacs, I immediately thought of the Australian serial killer Ivan Milat, probably the most notorious serial killer in Australian history. and who died quite a few years ago. But yeah, he will pretty much live on in infamy. So you've got the serial killer aspect going on that takes place in the past. You've got the girls' retreat that takes place every last third of every chapter, which gives you the backstory as to what was going on leading up to that fateful morning of which the events happened, of which the character Alice Russell disappeared. You've got Aaron Falk and Carmen's investigation into the whole thing, but then you've also got another thing going on here, and this is something I did not pick up on at all. There's sort of this almost relevant modern day aspect to it, involving the idea of school bullying and of kids sending pictures that they don't realize will be used against them in such a way. That's a plot element here that takes place involving certain characters on their corporate retreats, kids being involved in it, and seeing the ramifications of what happens from that, and the ramifications of what happens from that, which directly affects the parents and their relationships with their co-workers, who are directly involved as well. So you've got all this, again, like a spider web of all these different intriguing aspects. As a piece of storytelling, it's really good. It's really fun. It kept me engaged. I don't know if I liked where it ended up towards the end there. I thought it was a bit too neatly wrapped, and personally, I think the ending to The Dry was far more, I wouldn't say cinematic, but the ending to the first one just felt a bit more personal, given to the fact that, again, as I said, Aaron Falk was both in the direct present day storyline trying to do the investigation, but he wasn't in part of that corporate retreat there, so you're only getting him for certain portions of the book, compared to the first Dry movie where you had him as a young teenager during those portions of the book as well there, so you got to know him a little bit better in the first one. But as a piece of entertainment, yes, I recommend it, and I'm really looking forward to the movie. I imagine that these are the sort of books that translate well to screen based on how they're written. They're sort of written almost like a screenplay, so it kind of makes sense. It's fascinating. I haven't actually highlighted any passages from the book because the writing wasn't the thing that got me. It was the story. The writing's nothing too great, but again, it gets where it needs to go. But there is one sentence, which is at the very end of the book, which really got to me, actually. I was actually quite amazed at how much I liked it. And when I mean at the end of the book, I mean like the last 20 pages. So this involves a waterfall that they find on their way there. And all it says is, an eerie nothingness enveloped them, and he felt suspended in the void. That's the sort of writing I usually encounter page after page on certain books. But on this book here, it stuck out to me. Like the lights of the torch that the girls use traveling through the paths of the forest, trying to find their camping location. It's really fascinating. Really intriguing book, and my first Australian read in God knows how long. I mean, I read a Warren Ellis book. Warren Ellis is part of the Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, but he lives in London now, and so he associates more with that. So I associate his writing with that. Same as Nick Cave. I read a Nick Cave book not too long ago, but that's more European than Australian. So it's very cool for me to read a book set in Australia and just learn about the locations of certain parts of Australia that I've never been to. Again, I live in Western Australia, which is far away from Melbourne, but I'm glad I took this detour, and I'm curious whether or not I will read the third book in the series, Exiles. Aaron Falk is a tortured character. He's an interesting character, but he gets the job done, and he sort of reminds me of those main characters in the book series over in America who are popular as well. And based on what I've read, Jane Harper is an extraordinarily popular book here. There's actually a few podcasts I listen to who are American who talk about her as well. So she's obviously translated well overseas as well. People seem to be reading her stuff. So whatever she's done it well, because she's an extraordinarily well-read and popular author. And the Dry series, I don't know if there's going to be a fourth one or fifth one or whatever, but the trilogy, so to speak, as I've seen so far, is immensely popular. My question is, given my reservations a little bit about Force of Nature, do other people out there have that same reservations? Do they feel that the first one, The Dry, is just a little bit better than Force of Nature? That's just how I perceived it. Force of Nature is a good, intelligent, engaging, and thrilling read, but it's not a great read, and personally I preferred watching the movie of the first one. But let me know what you think. And let me know if there any other Australian authors or Australian books out there I should really get into, because again, this is an avenue that I've just opened up. It's all new to me, and I want to see what this country has to offer. Give me the best of the best. Thank you very much, and see you on the next one. Bye.